Um, Hello, and today we're with Mark Stevens, the new Chief Executive of Yorkshire Cancer Research. We're going to ask him a few questions about Yorkshire Cancer Research and the work that it's doing in the Yorkshire region, which will be interesting to a number of the people who subscribe to my newsletter and also to the broader research community. Start with Mark, can we have a brief overview of Yorkshire Cancer Research and the work that it does?
Of course, and thanks for having me today. The organisation really raises money in Yorkshire from very generous donors. We don't get a penny from government or from grants. Everything is donated by the general public. And then we spend all of that money in Yorkshire, as the name suggests. And last year, I'm proud to say, we spent a record £6.4 million in the financial year in the Yorkshire science community that we so dearly support. And some of that work being really, truly world-class science. And I think within the 6.4 million, some of it is lab research, but some of it, which will probably be of particular interest to your subscribers and contacts, is funding businesses as they try and commercialise the great ideas that we've started in the lab.
Excellent. That sounds like you're doing a lot of good work with your money that you're raising. But briefly, what are the key activities of Yorkshire Cancer Research?
Well, once we get the money in, which comes from a variety of different sources, but all public donations, we then have the Scientific Advisory Committee, which effectively decides how we spend the money in the lab. And we have a bunch of different awards that we can grant. We have a 5-year programme grant, which typically would be a couple of million quid, maybe £2.5 million over those 5 years, funding a whole team of scientists, which gives them the flexibility to look at different things. We also have 3-year project grants, which are slightly more specific in nature, a bit more short-term, a bit more focused. Again, maybe 200 grand on average, maybe a little less in terms of check. And then we have, and this is I think quite a popular addition, what we call pump priming grants, which are 1 year discovery type phase research. When someone comes to us and says, look, I've got this idea, I'm not sure it'll work, could do a bit of funding for a year just to kick it along, see what happens. We have that as well. So real spectrum. And then latterly we also have some fellowships and PhD student type awards, which are basically trying to find the next generation of great scientists and promote young talent in our region. It's our dream that the scientists in this region are the best in the UK. It's our dream that the progress and the breakthroughs against this horrible disease come from Yorkshire rather than elsewhere.
Great stuff. It sounds like you're doing a lot, especially within the local universities, which some of the national charities often miss out on. So you're filling a big gap there. That's to be applauded. At what stage do you typically get involved with the technology?
Yeah, and the other part of what we do, which I didn't mention, was the commercial and clinical development work, where so far we've invested in 5 businesses that have spun out of universities. The most well-known perhaps being Procure, but there are other ones like Sizzle, Adjuvantics, Imagel, Photopharmaca. And we typically get involved right at the start. So once the business is formed, perhaps had a very small seed round, but is now seeking that next round of maybe, £500,000, 300 grand to 700, that kind of range, and comes to us as one of a number of participants in that first chunky-ish round. And so quite often we'll co-invest with the likes of White Rose or Yorkshire Fund Managers or the Viking Club or whoever else is interested in those sorts of investments. And as long as it's got very good science, but also a pretty clear plan of how they think they ultimately might be able to commercialise this science, we love it, because in terms of demonstrating ultimate patient benefit, that kind of stuff is just as worthwhile as the science that we fund in the labs in the unis. And we don't do it to make money primarily. We do it to fulfil our charitable objective, which is to fund research into the causes and cures of cancer, and demonstrate ultimately some patient benefit. But obviously there is a financial side to it, which we, if one of them does make a shed load of money and everyone is happy, we wouldn't turn that down, because we can then recycle that back into lab research.
Great stuff. So it is a commercial arrangement then. There'll be a exchange of equity for funding.
Exactly. We basically sign up to the same kind of shareholders agreement as a commercial or private venture capital outfit would do. Have the same kinds of rights, with the caveat that we're coming at it from a slightly different angle, in that we're not about making money from it. We're about trying to support the scientist get his or her lifelong work to market.
Yeah.
But clearly, if we're putting money at risk, then it is nice to have some return from it.
To reinvest in future programs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Either more CCD or as like commercial clinical development activities, or in programs or projects or pump priming awards. So it's a nice virtuous circle there.
Great stuff. And do you find that an investment from Yorkshire Cancer Research not only gets them moving, but also gives them a huge amount of credibility when they're out seeking other investors and things like that?
That's a good question. You're probably better asking the chief execs of the businesses we fund. But I mean, we never usually go alone. We're normally with 2 or 3 others.
Right.
And I think the fact that we're standing together gives each of us comfort.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of instances recently where 1 or 2 of the ones that we're in has needed a follow-on round. And so, all of the investors are kind of talking to each other about, what do you think makes sense? What level should we participate at? Who's going to do what? There's a real sense of partnership amongst the shareholder base to give the business the support it needs, which is nice. And in the old days, I used to work in a sort of slightly more cutthroat private equity venture capital environment, and this is very different. This is much more collaborative and supportive, I think.
Excellent. And it's also filling quite a large hole that's been left by the lowering of the activity of traditional VC companies. So
I hope so. I mean, I've heard the sort of equity gap thesis being mentioned, which is you can get the first kind of couple of 100,000 OK either from business angels or people scrambling around, and then if you need sort of 2-3 million plus, you can get the attention of some of the bigger boys who'll do that. But there's a real gap in that kind of between those 2 levels, and that's exactly the gap we and the likes of White Rose I think are trying to fill, which is to come in and support the businesses from there to there to let others then take it forward.
So if there's a academic or not academic technology inventor out there and they think that Yorkshire Cancer Research would be a good funding partner for them, how do they go about contacting?
Well, we have someone here who works part-time, but you wouldn't know it because he's a dynamo called Morgan Williams. So best thing to do in the first instance is get in touch with Morgan, whose details are on the website, and he can give you a pretty clear yes, it could be something, or actually no, that's not kind of the area we do. And then assuming it's the former, it's then basically a sort of a 2-stage, fairly swift diligence process where clearly we look at the science first. Does the science make sense, and how does the science actually stack up against all the other scientific activities that we fund? Is it international calibre? Is it really exciting? Assuming that ticks the box, then it really just gets into the kind of the usual things around, what's the funding requirement? How might we sit? Who else is going to fund it? What's the plan to get it to that next stage? How do you see this being commercialised? And a more of a sort of financial angle to it. But the first stage, as always, is this science really exciting? Is it really compelling? Does it look like something that could be a flyer?
Great stuff.
We're open for business. Always keen to sort of have chats with people. So our door's open.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for your time, Mark. It's really appreciated. It's obviously doing a lot of good work in the region and raising money and spending it all in the Yorkshire region. So it's to be hugely applauded. And thank you for your time.
Thanks for yours.
Thank you.